Hello and welcome back to episode 12 of the Go Far Fast Show, our small business talk show that aims to get you, our audience, the answers to the burning questions of these times. And we've got another wonderful show lined up for you today. So don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And Aaron and I will get answering those burning questions. I'm so excited about this particular guest today, Aaron. I know you are too.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Merle. So the name of the show, as always, is Go Far Fast, and that's exactly what we have for you today. Today we have an absolute cracker. The one and only Carl Reeder himself is with us. Now, I know he would much prefer to be on stage, sharing his wisdom to everyone in present, but we're honoured to have him virtually and to answer our burning questions. He will talk to us about his new book, aptly named Boss It, and we'll also find out what makes Carl a successful business owner and what the phrase H2H means, which I'm very intrigued to find out about. Now we can also get some great customers and, more importantly, how to keep those great customers as well. Then we head over to my favourite part of the show, which is all about those legendary community questions, and we're going to make sure that Carl faces the dreaded community questions as they come along. So Merle, how do we get those burning questions? What's the format of the show?
Right, well, thank you, Aaron. Don't steal my H2H question. I can't wait to ask this one. So as ever, guys, you know the formula well by now. Aaron and I will start off with some gentle questions to get Carl warmed up. I don't think he's going to need much warming up, but there are some common questions, lots of themes that you guys have been throwing at us. So we're going to start with those, focus a little bit on the Boss It book, which you can see has pride of place over my shoulder. If you haven't bought and read it already, go to Amazon and grab your copy now. It is fantastic and it's written in a tone that is incredibly approachable. So thoroughly recommend that. After that, as Aaron says, we're going to turn to your questions. Lots of different scenarios from the community today for Carl to cover. So I don't think I should take up any more time talking about Carl. I think we should hear Carl talk himself. Don't you agree, Aaron?
Certainly do. Can't wait to get him on. Carl, welcome to the Go Far Fast show. Thank you so much for your time today. We're going to throw you a question straight away, if that's okay with you. And we're going to start off relatively simple, but, you know, we're going to work our way up as well. Get ourselves those legendary community questions. So there's very little that you haven't done. Your book as well, love the book, Boss It, is all about taking control of your time, income and life summaries. It's all perfectly. It's great to read for anyone staring and running or starting, should I say, or running a small business. And like Merle and me, you've also regular on QuickBooks Ask the Expert, which is great to see. Live stream series 2, so definitely had some questions thrown at you over your time there, as me and Merle have as well. And can you briefly share with us the question itself is the journey to becoming a 5-star rated business advisor and author on Amazon?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, Merle, Aaron, thank you so much for having me. Absolute pleasure to be here. And the journey, there's clearly a very short story and a very long story. I'm going to try and go somewhere in between, just to give you a bit of a flavour about who I am, how I've had the really wonderful opportunity to write a book, but also, sharing some of the pivotal points on that journey. You see, I have to be honest that when I started out, I would never have been imagined as an author. You know, if you would have asked my old English teacher, Mr. Takakshu, he absolutely hated me. I was actually really fortunate to get 2 Ds for English at GCSE. And I say fortunate because I left school before my GCSEs and went back to do the exams. So writing wasn't something that was always within me. It wasn't something that I always aimed to do. However, sharing my knowledge that I gained along the way was something that I wanted to do. And that was really simple. And it was because I'd fell into the world of accountancy at the age of 16, not knowing what an accountant was, not knowing who they serve, how they do it. I had no idea what an accountant is. You know, it's embarrassing to say this, but I didn't even know that they dealt with money. I didn't realise that it was about adding up numbers. I just thought that it was a job and I took this job. But what I found was that by starting in that world, I got to meet business owners. I would go out and about. I started by training them and getting them to understand how to computerize their at the time, manual records. Bear in mind, this was back in 1997. I then got involved in the buyout of the business that I was in. I built up my own portfolio, started advising the clients, started building the business, built it up to a multi-million turnover. And then in 2012, started the process of stepping away from the business. So when I say stepping away, I don't mean working on the business rather than in it, as most people would say. I mean truly stepping away. I mean trying to build a life where I could sit on a beach and have no involvement in the business whatsoever. Clearly, as I'm sat here today, it's proof that that's still a work in progress. However, along that journey, I was gifted with more free time that allowed me to speak on stage. It allowed me to write my very first book, The Startup Coach, which came about by accident. It allowed me to engage with the press and so on. And that's what led me towards, in 2019 up until February 2020, writing the book Boss It.
It's such an amazing journey, Carl. I love that. I mean, how many of us, Aaron, are accidental entrepreneurs and we sort of end up doing stuff that we really couldn't have imagined ever doing. It's a journey that I'm sure a lot of people relate to. It's also incredibly impressive that you are entirely self-made. So you took the opportunities, you took your own fate into your own hands and you went out there and made it. And I guess my question for you is very much on that theme. I mean, my copy of your book is very dog-eared, has lots of post-it notes. I've folded them all over, folks, so you can't actually see them in what's behind me on the shelf. So Carl, sorry, tried to make it look as respectable as possible. But I've got notes all over your book and there are so many points that stood out to me. But I think one of my favourite bits is where you talk about what it takes to build a successful business. And what I particularly loved is your discussion actually about how that starts, and you really need to focus on being a successful business owner. So it takes it very much back to the individual and what the individual is capable of. I wonder if you could just share some thoughts on that with our viewers.
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing I would say is it's very kind of you to say I'm self-made, but I don't actually think that anybody is self-made, because we are all a combination of the experiences and learnings that we've had along the way. And, I'd be wrong to say, although I didn't stick it out at senior school, I was very fortunate enough to be given a grammar school education, just by the postcode lottery of having a few grammar schools in my area. I now know, first of all, what a benefit that was. That it gave me the opportunity of social mobility, and also the fact that had my postcode had different letters in at the start, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So, I think that what we need to do as potential business owners, or even as existing business owners rethinking what we do, we need to understand very realistically how we're getting into the game, and what skills and experiences we've got that we can bring to the table, but also where our blind spots are as well. And the challenge for business ownership is certainly in the early days and for the mass market. When I say the mass market, I mean the 70-odd% of us who want to be business owners but aren't necessarily at the moment. It's actually only 1 in 7 of us who are. For the 70-odd% of us that want to be business owners, according to the World Options Survey, the things that hold us back is ultimately a lack of confidence in, are we able to run a business? What will people think if it goes wrong? Have I got the money or the skills or the time to do it? And it's a fear of taking that leap. And the reality is that the 1 in 7 of us who have done it, and to put the 1 in 7 into context, if any of us, open our doors and look left and right and across the road, we will see a business owner, even though we might not know they're a business owner. There are so many of them in the country. The reality is that the 1 in 7 didn't have a perfect roadmap lined out, regardless of whether they were, the stereotypical self-made, or on the flip side, if they had a trust fund, there would have been some things sat in their mind that would have prevented them from doing it, were it not for the blind confidence or naivety that we all need to have to make that leap. Now, I guess the thing that we can take away from this, and the learning that I would like to share with everybody, is that whilst there needs to be a bit of control over that risk and a bit of bravery to do this, we can also stack the odds in our favour by making sure that we prepare in the right way, by making sure that our idea is the right kind of idea. Yes, that's why I discuss in the dream part of the Dream Plan Do review, that we're very realistic about our own personal situation, plus the situation that the business will be in going forwards. And provided that we take that approach of a healthy amount of planning alongside visualizing what the business looks like, then actually we can set the business up on the best possible way that we can.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. And I think as well, you talked about the fear factor, and I think that's a huge element to it, isn't it? And that's the 1 in 7 that you were talking about versus the other 6 in 7, and having that whole opportunity to take that fear factor and run with it and everything else. But I think it's important for people to remember the benefits that they get from making that leap, when they have got the opportunity to have their own business and the benefits that it brings with it. And I think some people just need to know that fear factor and know, that there is a worthwhile cause at the end of it. But yourself, Carl, you said yourself, you've had to go through that momentum. You've had to take that leap. You've had to push that fear aside and go for it yourself. But I would love to know if you could give us a few of those little secrets, those little niblets that's going to help other people be inspired as well. And the question we got next is, so what I want to know is, how can you control your time, income and your life when you're running a business? What is that secret? What's the thing that gets you motivated, Carl?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 questions there. The first one about overcoming that fear and how you make that jump. I think that you need, as a potential business owner or even as an existing business owner, to think about the reality that most business owners find themselves in. And whilst it is scary to start, once you've made that jump and you've started the business, how many business owners then go back to employment? Yeah, there's not many that do that through choice. And it is tough, it is scary, you do have to really put your neck on the line. But on the flip side, it's great to have that control and have that ownership of your own destiny rather than leaving it in someone else's hands. Which I then guess segues us very nicely into, how do we control our time, income and life? The reality for me is that business ownership, that's the phrase I prefer to use. I don't tend to use entrepreneurship or any of these other words. I just think of myself as a multiple business owner. I see that business ownership gives me the ability to choose which 18 hours per day I work. It gives me the opportunity to decide whether I'm taking money out of a business or not, and so on. However, the reality is, when we drill down into those choices in the early days of business ownership, those choices are made for us by external circumstances. So they're made for us by the amount of work that we can do ourselves, the amount of money that we can get in from the bank, and then the amount of customers we can find, and so on. Now, by going through the process of not only starting the business, but then scaling it to become a true business rather than a self-employed job, that's when we get the real spirit of control. And for me, I guess the biggest learning that I took from this, not wanting to recommend too many other books apart from my own, but was actually from a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad 2, The Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, Kiyosaki talks about the cash flow quadrant, where you have employment, self-employment, business ownership and investment. And the reality for most people is that they stick in employment or self-employment because it's deemed to be safer. You don't have to take so many risks and so on. But the reality is, when you sit on that side of a quadrant and you are the business is you, or indeed you're an employee, but if you get run over by a bus, and touch wood, it never happens to any of us listening, but if you get run over by a bus, then your income stream is cut. You're also limited from a personal flexibility perspective by your client's needs. And you go from, let's say you're a self-employed professional, you go from having one boss to having 100 bosses. Now, the moment that you move to business ownership, and what does business ownership mean? It means having a business that can work without you. It means having systems, processes, operations manuals, having management tiers and all of that kind of stuff. Once you've got that in place, then you really are in the position that you can start to really control how much income comes in, what profitability is there, and also your level of involvement in the business. So it's not actually the starting the business that gives you the control. It's about scaling it in the right way and making sure that you as the business owner aren't the bottleneck in the business. That's the key to getting that control.
I think that's brilliant. We have one more question from Aaron and myself, and I can see the community questions banking up, and our producers are going to get very cross if we don't get to them very quickly. But very quickly, Carl, you talk in the book, and I think this sounds to me completely right now. I've read it, that business has moved from being B2B or business to business and B2C, business to consumer, and we're now very much into what you call H to H territory, so that sort of human to human territory. Can you give us a very quick glimpse into your thoughts on that, and then we will turn to the community questions?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're living in the world of a personal brand now, so I think it's magnified. However, something I'll say, a book that was an inspiration of mine was The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. However, that book is 20 years out of date, and it talked about a business being successful if you had extraordinary systems but ordinary people. Nowadays, I don't think that stands. I think that you need both extraordinary systems and extraordinary people. And the reason being is that extraordinary systems are no longer a differentiator. 20, 30 years ago, when that book was written, extraordinary systems either took a lot of effort or a lot of cash, but actually you can get these off the shelf. Combine that with the fact that we're up against automation, and there is always somebody who can automate something to be cheaper, faster, quicker than you can do it. And the reality is now that to stand out, we need to focus on one of two areas, either interpersonal skills or specialist skills. And when I say specialist skills, that's something that an algorithm combined with machine learning and artificial intelligence can't do. And there's actually not much of that stuff left. So if we're in a business and we're focusing on systemizing but losing the human touch, the challenge that we're going to face is that Tesco's or any other big corporate will come along and do it quicker, cheaper, just to grab the data. So what does H to H mean? I mean, my saying is that business is no longer B2B or B2C, it's H to H, human to human. And that's based on my theory that even if you've got two massive corporates dealing with each other, you might have Tesco's, as we mentioned, and you might have Sainsbury's. Let's say they were going into merger discussions. The reality is those discussions, regardless of the level of discussion, are between two individuals. They might be two junior individuals, they might be two CEOs, but it's a human relationship. And in business, I've noticed an improvement over the last 5 or so years, but we've allowed those human relationships to evolve. We tell people to book a link in on my Calendly rather than chatting to them. We dismiss things through a message rather than picking up the phone. And it combined with the shift towards the stay-at-home economy that we were all going through. And I say this before lockdown. Lockdown was an enforced stay-at-home economy. But before lockdown, we were getting to a point where the Internet of Things would automate a lot of processes for us. And there was conceivably a situation where we would jump into a self-driving car, to a pod in an office, jump back into the self-driving car, go home, have our Deliveroo or Uber Eats waiting outside for us, and then watch Netflix, rather than being in an open plan office, walking with somebody or speaking to the Uber driver, going to the restaurant and then going to the cinema. It was a real shift in society that was happening pre-COVID, let alone during COVID. And I think that, if we look at what the bigger brands are doing, they're adopting this human-to-human approach as well. You take Starbucks, for example. When you go into Starbucks and you order your coffee, they don't ask your name because they want to misspell it and have a bit of social media banter with you. They misspell your name because they realise that they might be the only person that actually speaks to you that day. And, it's actually really quite an uncomfortable shift that as a society we've gone through. Now I think that brands are starting to adopt this, are starting to bring a bit of a human tone in their communications. And I think that for small business owners, the real takeaway of this is don't be afraid to be human. You might feel that you need to call your business XYZ Corporation Limited, PLC, whatever. But actually, the real asset as a small business that you can bring to the table. And by the way, when I say small, I mean up to the size of the likes of Tesco's. I don't mean small as in a one-person business. If you're 10 people, 100 people, still do this. Have that personal touch flowing through your business, because That's what people are attracted to. And I guess to leave one last thought with everybody, if you think about your own social media, for example, do you follow brands or do you follow people? Most people follow other people. They don't tend to follow brands unless the brand has got something that really stands out with a human touch. So the likes of Specsavers and so on have done this really well by putting some personality in their communications. But most brands have a corporate tone of voice. And guess what? As consumers, we switch off.
I think that's...
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there, Carl. And I think also when you say about that human to human, and you're talking about that, that's also why we get into business in the first place. That's what we enjoy. You know, you said yourself you'd started out as an accountancy. The only reason I'm in accountancy is because I like talking to people and helping and solving problems and having those issues and having that human to human touch. And if we lose that, then we lose our whole essence to be in business in the first place, don't we? So I think that's really, really important as well. That's a great piece of advice. I know that we're being told to go straight into those community questions, so I'm gonna force us over there and you know, brace yourself here, Carl. We've got some absolute crackers for you. So the first question we've got, dear to my heart actually, this one. Hello, Carl. I'd love your advice. I've seen you on QuickBooks Ask the Expert. Brilliant. Yeah, so have we all. I've got an idea to change my business a bit after some things we've tried last year during lockdown. What's the best way to test ideas in your view? I'm really nervous about telling too many people about it because I've got quite a few competitors. I think we've all been there, haven't we? We've all thought of this wonderful idea, and we can't wait to get it to market, but we're a bit worried about, someone else stealing it. What's your thoughts on that one, Carl?
It's a really interesting one, and I don't want to upset the questioner, but I'm just going to dive in and give my honest advice. Your idea probably isn't that special, and I say that. Look, I had a couple of ideas that I didn't act on, and we've all had these. We've had these ideas where we think about them, and then we see it happen, and we think, I was the one who thought about that. So the two ideas for me, the first one was Recipe MP3, and this was back when MP3 players were big. And I was trying to cook something from a cookbook and my hands were messy. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could plug in my iPod at the time and listen to the recipe on the same timing that I needed to do the instructions? Now, clearly, the likes of YouTube and BBC Good Food and so on, they've just nailed it. And the second one was an eBay shop. So a shop where people can go in, take their stuff in, and an agency that can sell it for them on their behalf. Well, that got done not only through an international chain, but there's also an independent one on the film The 40-Year-Old Virgin. And I still come back and say, that could have been my idea, but the reality was it wasn't my idea. Because innovation comes about through a combination of a few factors. You need the ideation, which is where the idea is, but you also need the implementation. And the fact is, without implementation, it is just an idea. And all too often, businesses get stuck in this chicken and egg scenario that I don't want to put it out there in case it's not perfect or someone nicks it or whatever, but they want to get started. So you need to overcome this. And the only way that you can overcome it is through the realization that actually, if the idea was really that strong, somebody else would have done it. And on that basis, let's try it, test it, measure it, refine. So a few of the techniques that I use when I'm looking to test things. I don't roll it out to my whole businesses, but instead I look at pilot groups. I look at having focus group conversations to evaluate with. We have NDAs in place, but the reality is that they're probably not worth the paper they're written on. So we'll have focus groups to bounce around the product market fit. We'll then do a pilot with focus group members so that we actually have paying customers as early as possible. But then we're not afraid to get things wrong as well. And I'm a big believer when it comes to these things that sometimes you need to subscribe to the view of ready, fire, aim, provided the fire is limited insofar as the damage it can do. Don't aim it at the wife and kids. Aim the fire roughly at where you think the target is, but then adjust your aim accordingly. Then what it allows you to do is to evaluate what works, what doesn't work, and then ultimately refine into whatever pivot or new service or product it is that you're looking to do.
Yeah, I think that test with your customers and get that very real feedback is definitely the answer to knowing whether you've got a better idea, perhaps might be the same idea, but a better version of that idea than someone who's out there already. Great advice. Carl, I've got another one for you here, slightly different one this time. And the question goes as this. Carl, can you recommend a good starting point for creating a sales strategy? I don't know where to start, and I've read loads, but nothing really seems to be that relevant or detailed enough, and I've got so many questions.
Okay, so for me, sales is actually really simple once you've got a clear understanding of who your customer is, how you're going to reach them, and the value that you can bring to them. I think they are the three key components. So first of all, who is your customer? Hopefully, I'm not teaching you how to suck eggs here, but you need to design what's called your customer avatar. What do they look like? What do they want? But you need to go in more depth than perhaps you might think. So rather than just thinking my ideal customer is a business with 10 to 20 employees who's looking for HR support, for example. Rather than that, you need to really drill into the person who's the buyer. Who is the buyer? Well, in that 10 to 20 business, the buyer is either the founder, the partner, or the general manager. Now, the founder is typically a 40-year-old female. They will be interested in, I don't know, reading Country Living. They'll be interested in holidays to Spain and Portugal. When they're on holiday, they will do this, that, and the other. They'll drive this car. They will have this handbag. Really go into depth of how your potential buyer conducts their day-to-day life. Now, it might sound discriminatory. It might sound like you're becoming laser focused, because how on earth are you going to find this lady aged 43 who goes on holiday to this hotel in this region of Spain and so on? That might sound far too detailed, but actually what you're doing is creating an avatar of the wider group that you're looking to focus. And what you will do is, by looking at the brands that speak to them, you will understand what messages they're receptive to, what they're not to, how they make their buying decisions. Do they make them on price? Do they make them on logic? Do they buy products based on speed and efficiency? Do they buy them on prestige? What is it that they're looking for as an individual? And it allows you then to tailor every bit of messaging. And when I say messaging, I don't mean marketing. I mean every single communication around that. So that would be probably the key takeaway. And then from there, your value prop, you need to know what that is. I can't tell you in a blind 2-minute answer to a question what your value prop is, but you need to know it. And if you don't know it, get to know it. That is absolutely vital. And then when it comes to the delivery, just be out there. The problem is, when it comes to sales, a lot of businesses nowadays, and I'm certainly not accusing the questioner of this, but a lot of businesses nowadays rely on automation of the sales process. So they rely on things called funnels and email marketing and all of this stuff that hopefully takes away the awkward conversations. The reality that I've found when it comes to sales is that the very best way of selling is wearing out the shoe leather. And it's a really old-fashioned saying, but it's knocking on doors, it's speaking to people, it's going to networking events, it's having those conversations. And when I'm asked about, in my business when I was scaling up D&T, what was my best marketing investment? Red wine. It's as simple as that. It's about sharing a glass of wine with someone else, getting to know them on that human-to-human basis. I'd know them personally, I'd know their kids' names, I'd know where they go on holiday, I'd know what their interests are. We would become good friends, and then it would just naturally happen that they would want to do business with us. And we convert it from, with the combination of knowing exactly who they are, with being thought leaders in the field that they're looking to go for, we convert it from a sales process to a buying process, and then it becomes easy.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, just from that takeaway itself, I think now I'm going to have to change my whole marketing spend and take away all that craziness that we're looking into funnels and stuff, and just get a winery, I think, by the sound of it. And I think...
Well, it sounds brilliant, right?
Yeah, I think I've solved our issues there. But no, it's a really good point, though, because that human-to-human aspect is where it's all about, isn't it? And that's where, in this lockdown stage, has been so difficult for us. We've tried to emulate that human-to-human while being remote. And I think that's where a lot of businesses have either flourished or they've struggled and they're still trying to find their feet. And I think that's a really important takeaway there. The next question we've got there, Carl, is again one really close to my heart, finance and talking about accountancy and everything else. And Carl, we've been asked, I found managing the finances in my business overwhelming and honestly a lot of time. I put off doing my accounts because my days are so busy and I'm so tired at the end of it. Can your book help with that at all? Can you give me some advice on how I can make a bit simpler and easier to do this? I'm hoping to raise some money soon for my business, so I know I need to get the better of this. Have you got any advice there, Carl, that's going to help these people out? We know how important it is to keep your finances in check, but is there anything you can give them to help them be able to make that more efficient for them?
Yeah, of course. And this is going to be a fairly quick answer. Outsource it. I think that as a business owner, you need to understand the basics of finance, and my book can help with that. However, the problem is often it's seen as something that the business owner needs to get stuck into. And the reality is that it's not a good use of your time necessarily. So as a business owner, if you're looking to raise external funding, the kind of stuff that you need to know, the financial 101, the basic education that you need is, you need to know, are you making money? You need to know, have you got cash? Are you going to run out of cash? And you need to know about the different types of funding. And when I say about the different types of funding, you need to know about the risks that they open you up to, the cost of them, and what sits best with you emotionally. You don't need to know the ins and outs of the finer points of the different stages of venture capital funding and so on at this stage. You just need to know the clear direction. So I would say that a basic education is important. However, as finances aren't your skill set, absolutely look to outsource or employ somebody to do it. Because as a business owner, what I always try to do, whilst I'm an accountant by training, I am the world's worst accountant. I'll be very honest. I don't enjoy accountancy. I don't enjoy numbers. I actually find it all quite overwhelming as well when I see the details. So I always look to narrow things down to 3 key numbers that tell me whether things are good or things are bad. And I look to do that in every area. So, for example, with our profit and loss, so what we've earned minus what we've spent tells us what we've got at the end of the year. I look at what is our sales, what is our margin, what is our total overhead. And if one of those is out of kilter, the team then go look into it and fix it. So when you know the key highlights that you're aiming for, it becomes so much easier. To understand what it is you need to aim for, you can either take advice or you can perform that basic education yourself. But ultimately, I think a lot of this will come down to outsourcing.
That's brilliant. Really, really great advice there. And I think it's quite reassuring, actually, to so many of us, myself included. I have Aaron happily, who answers all my noddy questions these days. But, you're right. It is a better use of your time to get somebody who knows what they're doing in, to guide you, to get you comfortable, but also to look after it on a day-to-day. Now, folks, we've got lots more questions for Carl. If you really want to hear more of those answers, or you haven't got to your question just yet, don't worry, the extended podcast version will scoop them all up and contain them. So if you're listening to us on the podcast, hang in there. We're going to get to those questions in just a moment. For everyone else, we do need to wrap up. Carl, that was phenomenal. Thank you so much. I should add that there's lots more wisdom and guidance also in Carl's book, Boss It too. So many of the themes and much of the advice he shared with us today is, of course, in that book. So go log on with Amazon and grab it now if you don't have it already. That was so helpful, wasn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, we've had some really great guests on the Go Far Fast show. We've been really lucky. But what I love today more than anything is just being able to look at those certain things that we all take for granted and being actually told, you know what, sometimes you've got to look at them in different ways. Like the whole phrase H2H has completely changed the way I'm having to think about how we deal with our sales funnels and how we look at our business to business. And I think it's so important, isn't it? We need people like Carl telling us that these simple little things, these simple little changes can have such a big impact on our business going forward. So thanks, Carl. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Aaron is now off to Tesco's to buy some wine. Can you get me some too, buddy, while you're up there? Okay, folks, so don't forget, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know if there are questions that we're not yet getting to on the show that you want to hear the answer to. We have plenty more guests, plenty more episodes lined up. So if you let us know what you want most, obviously we can prioritize those shows for you. It just remains for me to say, once again, Aaron, always a pleasure. Carl, you're a legend. Thank you so much for coming on today's show and sharing your wisdom with us. And we will see you again in the next episode, folks. Don't forget to go far, fast.